Andrew Bateson is an active 14-year-old. He's a whiz on the ice and on his bike.
My dirt bike, I have a Honda, and I like that because it flies, it goes really fast. And I just like hitting like jumps and just being like in the air. Some people like treat me differently, and I don't like that. I really don't like that. Like, if I'm playing a sport, they'll be like, oh, okay, you can start whenever you want. I want them to be hard on me like the regular kids, so that way when I, get older, I'll learn to have to push myself to do stuff.
Andrew lost both of his legs when he was 6 years old. His parents, Scott and Rebecca, remember just how they felt when they learned that their son would have to endure a double amputation.
What had I done that God made this happen? I guess that was my reaction at first was, I must have done something wrong, and this is his way of punishing me, because this would be probably the ultimate way to punish a parent.
The nightmare started July 3rd, 1997. Andrew complained he was hot and tired. The next morning, his parents noticed tiny scratch-like marks on his chest.
Mommy, Dad, I'm not feeling good.
The little cat scratches became blotches, and then the blotches moved up his chest. They moved down his chest. They were on his legs. It was literally watching him turn purple in front of our eyes.
Bruises developed under Andrew's skin and began to spread. Scott and Rebecca rushed him to Rhode Island Hospital. Dr. James Lanakis was first on the scene in the pediatric emergency room.
When I saw Andrew, I knew exactly what it was. I've seen children die within a matter of hours from the time of presentation to the emergency department.
Andrew had bacterial meningitis, an infection of the blood and the lining that surrounds the brain. It's still a mystery just how he contracted the often fatal illness.
When I first heard the word bacterial meningitis, my first feeling was of helplessness. As a mother, your first reaction is to want to protect your child. And as time went on, I realized that this was way beyond any miracle lips I had, that there was no way I was going to kiss these boo-boos away.
Doctors and nurses worked round the clock to keep Andrew alive.
You pray just that he lives. That was the main prayer that I had at the time, was just, please let my son live. Don't take him away, he's too young.
Andrew lay in a coma for 23 days. Bacteria set off a toxic reaction in his body, and he went into kidney failure. Then, doctors realized that no blood was circulating in his legs. They presented Scott and Rebecca with only one option. Both legs would have to be amputated.
Here's my son. At 6 years old, he's going to be in a wheelchair. He's going to be watching his friends play, and all I could see was my son sitting there in a wheelchair, being unhappy. At that point, I was without a plan. I just didn't have a plan.
Family, friends, and neighbors took turns praying for Andrew. But to doctors, the situation looked grim.
I have never seen a child who had that degree of a rash with that kind of progression survive this disease.
Sort of really put everything I had into prayer that, that God was going to help Andrew.
Their church held a prayer and healing service just for Andrew. And on the day of his amputation surgery, Andrew's lead surgeon gave his parents the news they had been waiting for. Andrew, though still in a coma, would definitely survive. As Andrew regained his strength, he endured countless hours of physical therapy. Then came the big day. After more than 3 months in the hospital, Andrew went home. But the homecoming was bittersweet. Could the 6-year-old adjust to life without legs? Fast forward 8 years, Andrew's back enjoying the sports he loves. He took a break to show us just how his legs work.
The first thing I do in the morning is I get my silicones, which is a rubber type material that when I apply it to my leg, it's gets stuck onto it. So then there's a pin at the bottom of my leg, and then I take the leg, and there's a hole at the bottom, and I have to line the pin up with the hole. And then when you hear that noise, that means it's in. And that's back on.
He just amazes me, some of the things that he just goes out and does and doesn't think twice about them. You know, it's like, you know, he doesn't think about his legs getting in the way. You know, if he has a problem, he seems to work around it, and he finds a way to do it.
What I've learned from God, from all of this, is that you can put your faith in Him 100%. He was just as unhappy and sad over what occurred with Andrew as we were, but He has come forth and given us strength to be the family we are today.
Since his time in the hospital, Andrew has received a lot of community support. In fact, when local journalist Mark Patinkin picked up on Andrew's story, he thought he would just write a column about the family's ordeal. But when he learned about the Batesons' tremendous faith and reliance on prayer, he decided instead to write a book, Up and Running.
When I say I put a Whoa faith through this book, it wasn't just to chronicle faith as a source of comfort to the family. What struck me, and still strikes me to this day, is how faith seemed to play a tangible role even in the medical outcome of this. And I'm not even sure how to fully explain it. As I say, I'm a secular journalist, but I will sit here and tell you that there was evidence, speaking as a journalist, there was evidence that God's hand somehow touched this situation.